Scott, with Kirk and myself, Craig. In another episode of Observations, we have devoted this program, as we have our Yada Radio, the Shabbat Torah study, which will commence again this evening at 7:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific Time on Friday evenings on Yada Radio. We've been focused on what God had to say about religion and politics, patriotism and governance, and the book of Samuel. Samuel, he listens to God. And we've been, I think we began in the 7th chapter and spent a number of programs just on one passage, 7:3, and the insights that are provided to us therein. And then all the way through the 8th chapter of Samuel. And what we came to learn is that when it comes to government and religion, God has been crystal clear. That to engage in a relationship with God, we must first reject religion, and we have to distance ourselves from government. Those who choose government reject God. So, Kirk, what we wanted to do today is just finish that discourse, because there is a chapter break and we have concluded everything God had to say about government, which was incredible. I mean, it's just how they were going to, the government leaders would be self-serving. The first thing they would do to ensure that they remained in power is they would build a military. They would take draft sons, literally steal sons from families to become the troops within that military. Then they would rob the people of their productivity to build the weapons that would be deployed and by that military, and then they would use the military. They'd deploy it. They'd go to war. And that would be the primary trait of governments. But he also said, and beyond all that, they're going to tax you blind. They're going to do everything imaginable that is counterproductive to you. And even to the place where the women are going to be used to make drugs for you.
Right.
And so it all comes out at the end after saying that they're going to rob the productive and make and to enrich the leader and his cronies. God says, if you're going to choose government, you're choosing to reject me. He says, but I'm going to do everything I can to warn you about it.
You say something in another chapter of Observations, your new book on observations, that I thought was extraordinarily insightful when you talk about how it is our participation in making a pledge, in joining the group that does that gives them all the power. I mean, it seems a given that that's the case, but I don't think people realize when you join them, pledge allegiance, do all those things, that strengthens them and gives them the very power to do all these things. He has no army if the army walks away.
Correct.
He has no, if you don't pay the tax, he can't take it, unless he has an army to take it from you.
Yeah, God does not look at religion and governance and the military as victimless crimes. And he goes so far to say that the very participation of masses of people in religions and in militaries and in political schemes is what gives them credibility. It's what fuels them, and so he is extremely antagonistic towards those who choose to be religious. He says you're not a victim. You've actually empowered the institution. In fact, we're going to return to Proverbs 6. Which is where we began this program, largely because I was eager to answer a friend's email question about who the whore was in Proverbs 6. And so I did a very quick translation, but didn't do the in-depth commentary. And I've subsequently finished now the first 3 chapters of the book called Observations, and we're going to return there, which is where God says this very thing, that you are not going to be considered acceptable because you use the excuse of having been victimized by religion and politics, because you contributed to it.
Everyone did it.
Yeah, yeah, and by everyone doing it, you made it credible. So now that we have had God's take on government, which is the antithesis of Paul's. Now, that's one of the things that I had a conversation with someone today and then again yesterday about this, that when you compare what Paul said to what God said on every subject, they're the opposite. Paul's premise on government, speaking of the Roman government, is that it was put there by God. You should submit to it. It never wields the sword for anything other than good. God's perspective on government generally, and Rome specifically, is that it is corrupt. You should distance yourself from it. You should disassociate yourself from it. You should never submit to it. And that it wields its sword viciously and cruelly. And that he views it as an abomination. So now that we know all of that, the thing that we had not finished was the identity, the name of, and the place from which he came, of the specific individual that God was associated with human governance. And that man's name is presented to us in the opening statements of Samuel, 1 Samuel 9. So let's begin with what it says, and God always sets the context. God doesn't just say, hey, the guy's name was Shaul, and you take it or leave it. It's not important that you know his name, but I'm going to say his name anyway, but his name is Shaul. Don't bother to think about it. No, that's not the way God operates. He's going to give you all sorts of insights that help you understand. So this begins. Now, there was an individual could have been any one of the 12 tribes, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, was it?
No.
It was of a very specific tribe. Same tribe that the wannabe self-proclaimed Apostle Paul claimed to be from. From the tribe that Yahowah says is a vicious wolf. It's from the tribe that was the most ruthless against, of all places, Yehudah. Now, there was an individual from Benjamin. Now, Benjamin, if you ask a person who has some knowledge of Hebrew, will tell you it means son of the right hand.
Son of the right hand.
Ben is clearly son in Hebrew. No argument there. But is Yad or Yam the Hebrew word for hand?
Yad.
Yad. In fact, Yad is the first letter in Yahweh's name. In fact, if you're going to look for a Yad and try to understand hand, isn't the letter Yad drawn as a hand?
Yes, sir.
So is there any question in the world that Yad is the Hebrew word for hand?
None whatsoever.
Yam is a very common Hebrew word, isn't it? In fact, Yamin, and the plural, is written hundreds upon hundreds of times in the Torah. What does it mean?
I'm sorry.
Yam.
Oh, Yam is
Yam.
Yam is plural?
Yeah, well, Yamim is plural of Yam.
I'm sorry.
Yam means sea.
Oh, yes, I understood the sea, that like the Gentile nations, of course.
Right. Yeah, sea. Yamim is sea. In fact, it's interesting that Yam, sea, is associated with the Gentiles, just as Eretz, land, is associated with the Israelites.
And that's consistent, by the way, to point out to anyone listening. He never refers to them as the people of the sea. Only the
people of the land. Yes, people of the land. The Gentiles are the people of the sea.
All right.
Yeah, that's the reason why we know that, for example, the Torahless one that is misnamed the Antichrist by Christians. He's of the sea. He's Gentile. But the false prophet of the last days, he's of the land, which means he's a Israelite.
Right.
But so if we try now to understand Benjamin, because we've got a series of names here, and these names only provide merit. They're only useful to us if we take the time to translate the meaning of the name and then review them all in context. This person was a Benjamite, Benjamin. And when you look at Ben-Yamin, and I'm not claiming here that I'm a scholar, and I'm pretty sure that Scott and you, Kirk, are not Hebrew theologians.
You once called me the smartest person you knew.
I did, and it's true. And that's a compliment. Calling you a scholar and theologian would be an insult. So all we've got going here for us is a willingness to closely examine, carefully consider the words, and to deduce meanings based upon what the letters actually reveal. And so when you look at Ben-Yamin, you don't have son of the right hand, because there is no right associated with this, and no hand associated with this. And right in the sense of correct is sadak in Hebrew. And it's nowhere to be found in any of this. So I would be willing to venture the following translation for Benjamin. Son headed south to the Sea of Gentiles. From Ben and Yam, headed south to the sea, headed towards the Gentiles. Now that's fairly revealing, because what group of people did Paul claim were his exclusive authority?
All the Gentile nations.
Right. He didn't claim any authority over the Israelites group. Only he ran to the Gentiles. Now, of course, he ran to the Gentiles because the Israelites were familiar with the Torah, and if you're familiar with the Torah, Paul is a laughingstock.
Yeah.
So the only people he could fool were people who were ignorant of the topic he was discussing.
Let me share, if I may, let me show you all the stuff that I found on Benjamin, which was from all the different sources I have. It was scary. You've got, of course, it tells you what all of them say about the son of the right hand, called by the father, but that was by his own father, if indeed that was true. But we've got son of my sorrow from Benoi.
We're gonna get to.
You want to get to that?
Yeah, we're gonna definitely get to that. Yeah, boy, we're gonna get to that. But no. You can keep on going. The reason that you came up with Son of My Sorrows is because the birth of the boy that his father named Benjamin. That's not what Rachel, his mother, named the firstborn of the tribe of Benjamin.
Right.
No, she had quite a discussion, provided extraordinary insights into the nature of the most famous Benjamite who had ever lived, and that would be the self-proclaimed Apostle Shaul, Paul. But yes, a Son of My Sorrows is a reference to what Rachel, Jacob's wife, and the mother of the child that was renamed Benjamin, called him.
Yeah, I did a little research on the tribe, and of course, Benjamin, when he's born, other than the little bit of mention they have, he's excluded. He really doesn't. They don't say much about him at all. But there's a lot about the descendants' characteristics in the tribe, and ultimately down to Paul. They carried a banner with them wherever they went, and it was the sign of a wolf, because that was what they were, the blessing they had, or if you want to call it a blessing, that's what he told them their characteristics would be.
Right.
And then they're almost exterminated by the
While we're speaking of wolf.
Sure.
Paul only, the self-proclaimed Apostle Paul, he only attempted one prophecy. Only one. And that was what Christians would call the rapture. And they call it the rapture because the rapture is a vicious tearing away. The Greek word is harpazo.
Right.
And harpazo is a verb that describes a wolf ripping something away, tearing it away. And so the one prophecy that Paul actually gives features the wolf, this vicious ripping that Yahowah ascribed to the wolf that was Benjamin prophetically. And when Yahusha is in the Sermon on the Mount, demeaning the individual, the lowly and little one, which is what Paulos means in Latin, who would annul the Torah. He said that this wolf, in speaking of this wolf in sheep's clothing, that he would harpazo, attempt to snatch you away from God. So Yahusha uses references to the wolf, the vicious wolf, and tearing away, in his prophecy regarding Paul, condemning him. And the only prophecy that Paul actually provided, which, by the way, he got it wrong. He said it was going to happen during his lifetime, so he was wrong. He uses the vicious tearing away of the wolf.
Right.
So this, and most importantly, in that discussion that where Yahusha is presenting this one who would attempt to negate the Torah and therefore estrange those who believe him, keep those who believe him out of heaven, he said that he would be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so he's going to pretend to be one of the followers of the way, the sheep, dressing up as a sheep, but he's really a wolf, which means he's a Benjamite. So this wolf reference is not a small thing.
No, and when they put it on the banner, they're identifying themselves.
Right.
And there's some reasons for that, perhaps, and some interesting little asides that you dig out. First of all, Benjamin was the only son born in Canaan, so he's a child of Canaanite, more like a Canaanite than a Yehudim. My reference and my interpretation. Their territory, of course, was south of Ephraim's, but north of Jerusalem.
Correct.
It had a really narrow little area where all the roads had to go through there, and they became rather famous for being archers and slingers. That's a slingshot, of course, with like David.
Right.
And you usually use
although David was Yahudah.
Yeah, I know, but I mean that's the for people who think about what a slinger is.
Right.
And they really lived off of the people, robbing the people back and forth coming through there as well. They were almost exterminated by the other 11 tribes, which, in my opinion, would give you a bit of a chip on your shoulder by the time you get to Shaul as the first king, but everybody disliked them. But there was an interesting little note in Genesis 44:20, Benjamin is called a little one. And then you go to Catan.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
Now, the reason that little one is important is because not only does the name that Paul chose, because he was born as Shaul, the same name as the king that is going to bring so much harm to the Israelites, whom this prophecy really, the whole Samuel prophecy is about. Shaul, the wannabe apostle. But the name that Paul chose, the Roman name, the Latin name that he chose, means lowly and little. And that's particularly relevant because there are a number of prophecies. One by Yahusha during the Sermon on the Mount, where it says that the one that would attempt to annul the Torah and cause any aspect of the Torah to be negated would be called lowly and little. Paulos. And also in this program that we'll do when we return to Proverbs 6, in one of the last statements in Proverbs 6 where Yahowah is just hammering away at his disgust for the religion of Christianity, he ultimately says there'll be no forgiveness for the lowly and little, the one who perpetrated this, the lowly and little one. So yeah, being called lowly and little is a really, really big deal.
Well, that's the translation, but you go to Catan and get the rest of it, the word, and it's small, young, unimportant, and little. And then you go from that to Keton, which is a derivative. It's a small and insignificant and unworthy.
Where is that passage that you found this reference to, Benjamin?
44:20, Barbara Sheath. And then the two words I went to is Catan, and then Catan is Catan, which is from the root Catan. So you've got small, unimportant, young, little. Catan is small and insignificant and unworthy.
Lowly and little.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And lowly and little.
Anywhere you go, it's describing the same little creature, which is Paul. I mean, it's just, I'm beginning to believe that most of the prophecies were very helpful for the people as they lived during the time he wrote them, and it's almost like 7% of the Torah was written for this time.
Yeah.
It's more significant for us than in any group that's ever read the Torah.
Yeah, I think so. That's why I say we have it easier than anybody has ever had it.
Right.
So many times that people say, if I'd only been there during the Exodus with Yahowah, then I would have, been right up there and with them, and if God would present Himself right before me, if He were literally to walk in and greet me, then I'd be right there with you. But and my response is no. And people complain and says, well, I can't believe that God would go 2,000 years without a prophet to update His message for the progress of human history. And my response is always the same. There is no time in human history where we've had better access to God than we have right at this moment. And part of that is because of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and so we can get a really high quality text to read. And second is because of the prevalence of marvelous tools. Now, those tools are all corrupt, they're all flawed, but when you use them all together, it doesn't matter how dirty and dented the shovel is. You get 20 of them, and you start digging, you're going to find the answer. So there's lots of lexicons and dictionaries. There's also lots of interlinears. And then the letters themselves are so revealing because they convey meaning. And then if you really dig and you look for history and you try to learn by making connections, there is no time where that is easier or more fruitful than it is today.
Right.
And while the time will come where what we're doing will be punishable by execution, we haven't reached that point. We're at a time, and through a lot of human history, through the period of time that was dominated by the Roman Catholic Church, if you had a copy of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms in your possession, you'd be killed. If you had one in a language other than Latin, the penalty would be torture and then killed. So we are at a time where we can actually read this and discuss it openly. And so I agree with you. I don't think there's been any other time where it's been easier for us to make these connections and to learn.
Yeah. Well, from there I went to Benoi. Ben-on-E.
Okay.
And this is pretty amazing, too, and all the related words to that, which are, it's like going just a nuance, slightly different from the root. Benoi is the son of my sorrow, of course, son of my pain. It also can mean rebel, robber, servant, soldier, stranger. Ben can be builder of family name, conditional, afflicted, appointed. And it's also related to the word Gerber, which is warrior.
Yeah. And Benoi is the word that you're considering here. This is actually not anything other than a name. It's the name that the only individual that actually knew the boy that was renamed Benjamin. It's what his mother called him the moment he was born.
Right.
And so we'll get into great detail with what did she know that no one else knew.
What was she inspired to know?
Yeah, what was she? I mean, she was clearly inspired to know. Yeah, what did she know that no one else knew?
And why did they put it in the Torah if it wasn't for us to understand?
Correct. So we will get into considerable detail in all of that. All right, so now there was an individual of Benjamin. The son headed south to the Sea of Gentiles. So, by the way, that was true of the person that this prophecy was written on behalf of. This prophecy was written so that we would understand that a self-proclaimed apostle would arise out of the tribe of Benjamin, whose name would be Shaul, and that he would seek to influence Gentiles. That's the only reason this is provided for us. And his name, so this is going to go through the family tree here. So the first name is Cush, K-Y-S-H. Q-Y-S-H, Cush. He is the one who is crooked and lures into a trap, the one who is bent and bowed down, from Kosh to bait and entice into a snare. You know, the interesting thing about a trap is that the trap never looks like a trap. No. Not to the prey. You know, the trap is put on the most walked path of the animal, the most popular path, the favorite path of the animal. And it has whatever the animal likes in it. And it's disguised. And so, yeah, so this person is crooked, luring people into a trap. Twisted. Now, he was the son of Abiel. Abiel is, there's a positive way and a negative way to look at Abiel. And the reference to Canaan with Benjamin, and where we're going with this, requires us to look at the negative side. Do you know who the principal deity was of the Canaanites?
It was the Lord.
Nope.
I know.
El.
I'm sorry, yeah.
El. Yeah. In fact, it's the only it's the only civilization where El was actually the name of the god. You know, it's why a lot of people, they'll say you ought not write God because God's the name of a fake god. And by the way, I'm not aware of God being the name of a fake god. There's a Gad that's the name of a fake god. There's a Got that's the name of a fake god. But there is no God that is the name of serving as the name of a false god. And they said, you should write El or Elohim from the Hebrew Eloah, which means mighty one, mighty ones, or almighty. And I said, well, there is no admonition against using the title. Yahweh uses the title prescribed to himself. But the fact of the matter is that if you're going to use El, do you know that El is, in fact, the name of a pagan god? And not just any pagan god, it's the Canaanite pagan god. And so, yeah, the chief deity of the Canaanites was El.
Yeah, my father is God.
So this would be, my father is El. My father is El, representing the Canaanite deity. Son of Saor, and it's the TS, which is the signpost, and then R, which is the Resh, which is the observant head, Wah, which is the tent peg, and then the Resh again. It's the one who besieges and binds as an adversary. It's the one prescribing drugs. The one who distresses and ties up from Sa'ar, to bind and distress, to vex and to show hostility, to harass and to hate. Interesting word, because in the list of things that we were told that governments would do and the government leaders would do, but they would take the sons and turn them into soldiers, but they would take the women and turn them into drug makers. And I had shared with you that the term that most English Bibles translate perfumers doesn't mean perfume. It means to mix ointments that would be used as drugs. And I think since our last program, you went back and
I did.
and say, I didn't see that. I'm going to catch him on one of these days, and he's going to come up with something that's just not going to be. So I'm going to do that. And what did you find out?
I found out that the preparation for healing ointment, a salve to rub to the skin, it's definitely use of drugs.
Yeah, and the reason that's important is because the basis of Christian and the basis of Christ is from Chriso, which is the Greek word for to drug, to be drugged, to apply drugs. As a matter of fact, when Yahowah is speaking of Laodicea, and he's talking about their preoccupation with their health care, speaking of the democracies of the latter days, he specifically says that they, Christo, they make and apply a drug, an ointment for the eyes. Welcome back to Observations. As we consider this list of names, the first, of course, is Benjamin. So this individual was a descendant of the tribe of Benjamin, which is a son headed south to the Sea of Gentiles. And the first individual along the family tree was Kish, which is one who is crooked and lures into a trap. But during the break, Kirk, you mentioned that as you studied Kish, it's also to bring together and control, which is precisely the nature of religion. In fact, religion is based upon the Latin religion. Ligon is a ligament, and it is to reattach. So it binds the joints and bones together. So the very definition of religion is to rebind, to control, to create a mechanism which binds people in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
the two uses I found was like to bring together. They were referring to two things. One of them was fruit and grain, where you bring it together and you press the grain or together, so you're bringing it together. And they also say the same thing is to bring together and press or bind people. I mean,
yeah.
Well, gosh. I don't mean to laugh. It's kind of,
I know. But
I don't mean to laugh like it's funny. Just laugh like how.
Right. And the next one was Abiel, which is my father is the Canaanite god, El.
Right.
And then we moved on to Saror, which is one who besieges and binds, speaking also of religion, as an adversary. So this would be satanic religion, prescribing drugs and therefore specifically addressing Christianity.
There was a couple of cool things, related things, I should say, about this that I found from some ancient type of lexicons from the old roots and things. It's a group of things fastened together for ease of handling. Well, that's pretty good for government. Something bound up tightly, and it's also like to sar, from the word, is a hard pebble or flint, or a small stone, or a least of the piece of grain. A small piece of grain. So once again, we have we have the pressing together, we have handling of people, controlling them, we have tightly bound, and then we have, once again, a reference to small.
Right. And we have, of course, adversary, vex, and show hostility, and those are relevant here because Paul admitted that his ego was so out of control. And ego is usually out of control for a very insecure individual, that Satan had to demon-possess him to control his ego. Satan is the adversary. So Paul, being demon-possessed, was in league with the adversary. Prescribing drugs is relevant because the basis of the Greek word that has become Christ and Christian means to apply drugs. So he's speaking directly of the birth of Christianity. As it relates to vexing and hostility, we should also be aware that not only was Paul extraordinarily hostile to Yahowah and to his Torah, he was also at war with, unbelievably hostile to, condemning the disciples of Yahowah, specifically Shimon Kephesh, Peter, and Yochanan, John, and Jacob, James.
Let me toss one other goodie in here. It's also a bundle, a parcel, a pouch, a bag, or a purse. Purses carry money, and Yahushua told his disciples, don't carry a purse to collect money in like the priests do.
Right.
Yeah, without that, Paul has nothing because he's always asking for money.
Yeah.
As is Christianity.
Correct. The next name in the list is Baccarat. And Baccarat was originally challenging for me, probably the hardest of these initially, because of my just kind of knee-jerk cursory response, because I know that it is based upon Bakar, and Bakar means firstborn son. So Bakar speaks of firstborn. So a Baccarat would be a firstborn son is what most people would define it as. But as you really examine the word's etymology, what you find is that a more accurate and telling definition of Baccarat is one who laments the birthright. One who's the first to cry and complain. And it's from Baccarat, Bakar, and Bakat, which is firstborn to wail and lament, offspring of weeping bitterly. Now, why the primary definition is so important here? One who laments the birthright. One who complains against. One who is opposed to. One who is jealous of the birthright. But what is the birthright? Israel are the chosen people, and they were the first that were offered the covenant and inheriting all that Yahweh has to give, including the land, and adoption into his family, participation in his family, is the birthright. And so what did Paul do? He annulled the old covenant. And he created a new covenant with a different birthright for a different group of people. And so Paul is the epitome of annulling the birthright and lamenting the birthright of Israel. So that you could not pick a more appealing name to describe someone who did what Paul did.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah. The next name is Afyak. Afyak is I breathe that which breaks and ensnares, inflaming souls. I am the source of breath. I am the source of souls. From puak, to blow hard, to blast away, to snare, to break with one's breath. Well, the thing that Paul broke with his words was the Torah and his covenant.
That's what I got, yeah.
That's what he did, and just think of the souls that were ensnared by those inflamed words. Demeaning, breaking the covenant, breaking, tearing apart the Torah.
And I also got a link to Puwak on that, which is to be puffed up.
Yeah, puffed up in the sense of arrogance, which was the hallmark, of Paul. So an individual. So this is Afyak, an individual son going south. Well, this was Ben, and then it was so this was not Benjamin, but Ben, and then the verb form of Yamini, which is from Yamen, which is, so the actual verb was Yamni, from Yamen, to veer right, going south. From Yam, sea, meaning Gentiles, a mighty and strong man, which is so this individual is going to be a mighty and strong man going south. Now, Paul claimed to be a vicious man who pummeled his adversaries, and here he says this is going to be an individual going south who starts off as a mighty, strong, vicious man. Now, where did Paul begin life? North or south of Israel?
He was north of Israel.
Yeah. He was Paul of Tarsus, which is up there in what is Turkey today. Yeah, he had it south, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when the disciples called him into Jerusalem saying, come on, pal, you're speaking out against circumcision, and circumcision is the sign of the covenant. You can't claim to be speaking for the God of the Torah and condemn circumcision. I mean, that's like saying I'm speaking for the God of the Torah, and the God of the Torah, but I'm annulling His Torah. I'm speaking for the God who offered the covenant, and I'm breaking that covenant. You know, you can't be against circumcision and speak for the God. But he was brought into Jerusalem, and he had to come south to do that. So he was an individual who prevailed through his own size and strength, his own power, and his own political and military authority. And that's what Paul did initially. A mighty and strong man going south. A man of wealth and twisted capabilities, politically and militarily, who gives birth to anguish and suffering. This is Chol. That's not a very inspiring list of names to come from, is it?
No, it's amazing, those words in light of what we know of Paul.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it goes on. And you know, you have to say, is there any reason that a sane God would provide a list of names like this unless it was for a specific purpose? And could there be any other purpose in this name, in this list of names?
Zero.
Other than coming to understand the derivative of all of this, which is the founder of the Christian religion.
Doesn't you know, the last name, Apioch, which is Poach, it was the related word to that, which words was also I found was words that grow a wall around sheep. In our case, the sheep being a metaphor for the Yahowah. And then you go to Chabuk, and doesn't Yah tell Chabuk to wait for this man who with his inflammatory words that he will surely come, and basically described him doing the same thing? So, I mean, it's just, you can't have this many connections, and, I mean, this ain't, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes here.
You know, you don't, but you have to have the same approach that Sherlock Holmes had, which is Sherlock Holmes. I mean, the whole myth of Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Extraordinarily observant.
Right.
Okay, that's his number one skill set, is he was observant. You want to understand what God's saying, you have to be extraordinarily observant. You've got to notice and look for and notice all of the little details. And then the next thing that made Sherlock Holmes, the myth of Sherlock Holmes, so impressive, is that he knew how to make connections. He knew what was right and what was wrong in the scene, and could deduce conclusions from the evidence. So he processed what he saw, he closely considered what he saw, carefully considered what he saw, and was able to draw connections based on this. If you don't apply those two skill sets, the Sherlock Holmes skill sets, to go from being very observant to drawing conclusions that produce understanding, then nothing God says is going to have any value.
True.
I'm just finished moments before the program began, looking at a combination of nouns that were strung together in Yahowah's conclusion of his fatherly advice to his son about religion and politics. And the two words specifically said that those who chase after, who pursue, who are counted among the religious, that they lose the ability to exercise good judgment. They lack the ability to be rational and reasonable. And I think that's precisely what's being said here. That is, if you lack the ability to be rational and reasonable, all of the evidence that we're considering here is not going to mean anything to you.
And obviously there's a lot of them because I don't know how many people collectively, the whole family consisting of those today, have talked to, and it just falls on deaf ears. And when they know there's something to it, they just walk away like,
Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
about that.
It is. It's and God is saying it's the first and most egregious influence of religion, is that no amount of evidence or reason does the religious individual any good, because they lack the ability to process it. All right, so this mighty strong man who is going south to capitalize politically and militarily to give birth to anguish and suffering. And in this regard, he had a son whose name was Shaul. Shaul means to question him. It is from Sha'al, which is, Sha'al means to question. It's written identically, Shaul, to what other word in Hebrew?
Sheol.
Sheol. And what is Sheol?
Sheol is the place of separation from Yahweh.
Yeah.
Not a good choice of names.
The realm of dead souls who are questioned and then eternally separated from God, the place of no return, of absolute abandonment, of punishment, of continuous, a place that is, I'm not going to say better known, more commonly known as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the man's name. That is also the given name of the wannabe, self-proclaimed apostle that founded Christianity, that authored half of its New Testament, Shaul. And he said that this is what is so fascinating. He said that, and in this regard, he had a son whose name was Shaul, a good, generous, beautiful, and pleasing young man who was preferred as a fighter. Now, it is fascinating to me. In fact, I was thrilled to read that this man that Yahowah had just said would plunder the Israelites, take advantage of them in every possible way, deceive them, plot against them, rob them of their sons, of their productivity, of their very lives, that he was good.
Yeah.
You're familiar with Dode?
Yeah, very much so.
Was Dode good?
No.
Was Dode right with God?
Absolutely.
Is Dode considered righteous?
Absolutely, by Yahweh.
Of all the people that have come along life's way, who is the person that God says that he loves the most?
Dode.
Dode. So Dode was not good, and yet he is the most loved by Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
This fellow was good, and God just went through a chapter of assailing him, saying how much he hates him.
All right.
So that gets us to a really important thing. You know, I went out on a limb about a year ago. It's something that really resonated with Larry, who we'll do this evening's show with, where I said, I'd much rather be right than good. And that the more that I study the Torah, the more I've come to realize that being right is essential, being good is not.
No.
And here's a perfect example. This person was called good, who was extraordinarily wrong as it relates to Yahweh. Dead wrong. And the person who was bad is decidedly not good. Dode is considered righteous with Yahweh because he was right when it comes to the Torah, to the covenant, to how to observe one and how to engage in the other.
Okay. And even in your translation here, same as I got, is it is the one they chose. They preferred him.
Yeah.
Preferred the man that was called good, but it was never ever referred to as righteous.
Yeah, he was Bakur, an adult male who was a fighting man with strength and ability as a soldier. That is the one that they preferred. But clearly here, he was good, generous, beautiful, and pleasing. Now, all the things that man seeks, he was a generous man. Wasn't that lovely? He was a good man. Oh, boy. He was a beautiful man. He was a pleasing and handsome and desirable, prosperous and charitable, values-oriented with all the proper characteristics to perform the expected functions.
But doesn't that relate to you, to David's son who ran off to the Benjamites, at the time to do something? I mean, trying to settle some old scores, and that, or remember when the Benjamites hated the fact that Jerusalem was picked and that David was there, and when you start reading that story between David and his son, who eventually Absalom, who eventually gets killed. Isn't it the same thing? I mean, they just,
yeah. I mean, the bottom line is that Benjamin was the smallest and least desirable of all of the regions given to any one of the 12 tribes. And so it was in itself lowly and little.
Right.
So it says, and there was not an individual among the children of Israel who was more good than him, who was more generous, beautiful, or pleasing than him, more handsome, desirable, or prosperous than him, more charitable than him, who did more good deeds or made people feel better than him. From his shoulders and above, however, he was grievously defiant and treacherously unfaithful. He was Ma'al, hard to understand, conceited, haughty, and improper, more so than any of the people. Now, this the second part of this, the reality is that that virtually every English Bible says that from his shoulders and above, he was taller than any of his people.
Right.
Well, if from your shoulders and above, if you're taller than anybody, that would mean you'd have a long neck. We get our height. Shaquille O'Neal's a lot bigger than I am, but it's because his legs and his body are taller than. It's his size from the neck down that we differ.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a bigger head than I do, than I have. We're not calling this guy a pencil neck. I mean, if he had a really long neck, he'd be really vulnerable in battle. Yeah, he'd be and he would be unattractive.
Yeah.
So when we read this from his shoulders and above, he was, and then you have to translate Ma'al. While a tertiary definition of Ma'al can mean higher, and therefore you can extrapolate taller, I guess. It really means Ma'al is, it's like where we get malevolent, malignant. And he manifests the highest level of sin, transgression and falsehood, trespass and adultery, and displayed exceedingly substantial violations of the standards, incurring the resulting guilt. So in terms of his conduct among men, he was one righteous dude. In terms of his conduct, his thinking regarding God, he was a disaster. And that's what this is saying. It's comparing the impression he makes among men versus the impression that he makes with God. Which one do you think matters in the end?
Well, the one between God and me matters more than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And there's where Shaul failed, both of them.
Right, all the shows.
Right. It also says he was hard to understand, conceited, and haughty and improper. Yahowah, proud and arrogant, self-serving, self-exalting, devoted to eagerly and zealously, albeit improperly, seeking and claiming a high, powerful, and official status. Boy, if that doesn't scream
I don't know.
Paul, yeah.
I don't know enough about Shaul the king to draw up that many, but it certainly is what it means, and she's got to be referring to Paul more than the king.
Yeah, there is absolutely no chance whatsoever that this applies to at least the last part of it to Shaul. It didn't do us any good even if it were true. It doesn't do us any good to know it.
No.
But it absolutely appeals to Shaul, who became Paul. Now we began talking a little bit about Benjamin from Rachel's perspective.
Okay.
So let's turn to the Torah. Rachel foreshadows the prophetic implications of Benjamin. And we're going to go through all of these names. We may not get them all in this program. We're going to go through all of this and deduce as much raw understanding as we possibly can from it. But the single most important is let's ferret out what Benjamin means. Because Paul, not once but twice, proudly boasted that he was a Benjamite. And God had a lot to say about the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, prophetic implications of Benjamin, and thus of Shaul. This is recorded for our benefit. I'm going to tell you again, Kirk, and this is something you know, but there is no reason, you can't come up with any reason whatsoever that what I'm going to read to you now was provided for our elucidation, other than to foreshadow the founder of the Christian religion. Because even if you were to extrapolate and say, oh, I'm trying to foreshadow the nature of King Shaul, well, God himself laid out everything that King Shaul was going to do and right in their presence, and they ignored it all. So defining the nature of Benjamin would be meaningless to them.
Right, because they had already picked him.
But limited number of people for a limited amount of time. But Shaul, the founder of the Christian religion, we're talking about tens of billions of souls. We're talking about someone who has infected people for 2,000 years. This is big prey now.
Right.
And so there's only one reason that God would bother to tell us this story, to warn us about the man that God hates most in all of human history. And I have asked to be at 2 trials. I really want to be at 2 trials. Now, there's a few more I'd like to be at, but there's 2, and maybe it's really 3 because I really dislike Hadrian. But the 2 trials, because I know Muhammad pretty well, I'd like to be at Muhammad's trial. But I really want to be at Paul's trial. I despise Paul. And so it's going to be tough to wiggle my way in because God's got so much against him already slated for his trial. So let's begin. So they set out, and this is now speaking of Rachel and Jacob. So they set out and pulled away from Bethel, the home and family of God. Then it came to exist now and would repeat after a duration of time. When they were a particular distance away. The land they were approaching and entering, Ephrathah. And then it was when Rachel went into labor and gave birth. But in her labor and childbirth, she experienced great distress and opposition. So when he became stubborn and unyielding, and confusing, confrontational, and obstinate opposition during labor and childbirth, she said, to the one helping her give birth, you should choose never to respect this one. Because indeed, another son is for you. And it was with her soul that indeed she was dying. So she, this is Rachel, called out, Ben-Oni, my son of unrighteousness, my son of idolatry, my son of iniquity, my son who exalts himself in vain. But his father summoned him as Benjamin, son turning south to the sea of Gentiles. Okay, so let's go through this, because this is all prophetic of the wolf in sheep's clothing that would tear people away from the Torah, according to Yahusha. Yahusha didn't use that metaphor casually. He is, when it comes to making words sing, God's really adept.
Mm-hmm.
So they set out and pulled away from Bethel, the home and family of God. So the thing that they were leaving was the home and family of God. Yeah, they're leaving. They're walking away from the covenant. Yeah, this kid was born estranged from, walking away from the house of God.
Right.
He wasn't born in the house of God. He wasn't born approaching the house of God. He was born walking away from the house of God at a considerable distance. Well, so that's significant. Then it came to exist now and would repeat after a duration of time. Ode. It came to exist beyond this point and subsequently. Speaking of something that would be repeated, occurring again, and now bearing witness to it. Well,
clue.
Now, you think that's a clue?
I think so.
That as we're walking away from the house of God, there's something that was going to occur and then would repeat again after a duration of time. Yes, indeed.
Yes,
With
indeed.
Shaul, the wannabe self-proclaimed apostle and author of the Christian New Testament. When they were, which is, by the way, walking away from Bethel, the home and family of God. Right, absolutely. Right.
You're going to go to the
Walking to Paul's new covenant, his New Testament. When they were at a particular distance, we'll look at Kibroth and then consider the land. All right, so we have a number of really interesting clues. First of all, Rachel and Jacob were setting out from and pulled away from Bethel, the home and family of God, just as the self-proclaimed apostle of Christianity would pull the world away from the household of God and would oppose the covenant, which is the home and household of God, the family of God. And then it says it came to exist now and would repeat after a duration of time. Ode, we're speaking of now and then, of the Benjamin being conceived and then the ultimate consequence, the ultimate Benjamite, the most infamous Benjamite of all time in Paul. When they were at a particular distance from God, Kibroth, creating a distant multitude by intertwining. Now, Christianity, I used to be a Christian, so it pains me to have to say this, but Christianity is synchronized. It is a blend of all of the pagan myths that came before, based primarily on the Babylonian myths, and then with other, particularly Grecian myths blended in. But everything in Christianity has been an amalgamation of the pagan belief systems of the people that the Roman Catholic Church in particular wanted to gain mastery over. And what they figured is that rather than trying to convert the masses to their new religion, they would just convert their new religion to appeal to the masses. So the Christian Jesus is modeled after Dionysus. The Christian philosophy is modeled after Gnosticism. Christmas holidays, Sunday, Easter, Christmas, are all modeled after Ishtar, the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God. The Trinity is Babylonian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every aspect of it, everything of it, is an amalgamation of pagan doctrines, all intertwined. So when you talk about an intertwined religion, the most intertwined religion of all time,
well, I would go if you take all these pagan things away, they ain't got nothing left.
There is nothing left of it.
There's no Torah in it.
No, there isn't. And so it's also an implement used to strain out rocks from the grain. But Do you know of an individual that was referred to as a rock? I know two.
Oh, yeah.
That are really important rocks. Who are the two important rocks that Paul? Yeah, that is correct. He was the rock of our salvation. And what did right
as a stone?
The person that Shaul calls out by name to personally condemn is Shimon Kefish. In fact, he even calls him by the Kefish title, which means rock. And his whole idea was to strain out Shimon Kefish's, Peter's influence. So, when they were a certain distance away, we're talking about the Benjamite here that would strain out the two rocks, the rock of our salvation, Yosha, who he never once quoted accurately. Only attempted to quote once and misquoted him regarding the covenant. And Shimon Kefish, who is the person that he was most at war with during his career. So, another clue. Now, by the way, you're free to say we're reading too much into this.
No, I don't think we are.
But by the way,
doing the research, you find that, no, that's exactly what it says if you read it.
Yes, and I agree with you. My retort would be, yes, that's what it actually says. My retort would also be that the author of this is a lot smarter than any of us, and therefore was able to communicate at many levels. So the author of this was able to convey a message that would be instructive to those who heard it, meaningful to those who heard it 3,500 years ago, and be instructive and accurate to those who are reading it today. And the only thing that is instructive and enlightening today is what all this points to. And that's why I think you'd be foolish not to consider these connections. So let's continue with them. It says, the land they were approaching and entering was Ephratah. So they had left the home of God, and they were headed towards and now approaching and entering Ephrathah. Yeah. It's the singular of Ephraim. Ephraim was the tribe most supportive of and loyal to Shaul, which was angered when the royal prerogative was transferred from Yehudah. It's also the name given to the northern kingdom, which was in rebellion with Yehudah, prior to being depopulated and destroyed by the Assyrians. It is from Ephah, worthless and for naught. Can you say lowly and little? Ephah, to surround and to confine, binding. Can you say religion? And Eph, a viper and a venomous snake. Can you say Satan?
No. Now back up a minute. What's Latin for religion?
It means to religion, which means to rebind. Yeah, exactly. This is a satanic, demonic religion that is opposed to Yehudah and Yehudim, the place and the people, which is aligned with the northern kingdom that was in rebellion and ultimately was depopulated and destroyed because of the rebellion. And then Rachel is one of Jacob's wives. It means sleeping sheep who move away. Went into labor, and she gave birth. But in her labor and childbirth, she experienced great distress and opposition. Kasha. She encountered a cruel and confusing stubbornness, an unyielding and corrupt resistance, a complete lack of humility, manifesting a superior attitude, one who would be confrontational and brutal, causing great hardship and trouble, a difficult and perplexing force that was obstinate, burdensome, and genuinely bad.
That's a lot. That's a lot to say about a baby, even if you're having difficulty in childbirth. That's there for a reason. You could have said she was having a lot of difficulty with the child.
Yeah.
Giving birth to this child. You just wouldn't go there.
Right.
If it wasn't significant to tell you something.
Yeah, you wouldn't use a word that means opposition, for example.
No.
The child is not opposed to the mother. It's not opposed to birth. But this child was in opposition. Opposition to God, of course.
To life.
Right. This child admitted that he was cruel and vicious. When Shimon Kefish wrote of him, he said he was confusing. He was unyielding. He was corrupt. His resistance to God was based on corruption. He had an absolute lack of humility. Paul's ego is manifest all the way through his writing. In fact, in 2 Corinthians, he says, someone reading this, would look at the greatness of my revelations and in oratory, and they would say, I'm deserving of the ego that I'm manifesting. But, to keep me in check, Satan has demon-possessed me. Yeah, it's a special guy when it comes to conceit. So he was indeed a perplexing force that was obstinate. Now, written in the Pure Imperfect, the object, Rachel's son, suffers the ongoing and unfolding effect of the verb, making Benjamin stubborn and confrontational, unyielding in his resistance and opposition, confusing, corrupting, arrogant, troubling, perplexing, burdensome, and bad throughout time. She knew him. She was inspired to know him.
Most of all, that looking it up, too, is severe, fierce, stubborn, suffering. Yeah, severe suffering, yeah.
So when he became stubborn and unyielding in confusing, confrontational, and obstinate opposition, this is Ba-Kasha, again, with distressing resistance, with a superior attitude of arrogance, manifesting a perplexing corruption during labor and childbirth. She said to the one helping her give birth, the midwife, you should choose never to respect this one, because there is another son for you.
Isn't that the metaphor for the birth of Christianity?
Yeah. You should never respect this one, because there's another son for you. Rather than you should never respect the Benjamite, Paul. There's another son for you. Yosha.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's saying. Don't respect the Benjamite. Respect Yosha. There's another son for you. Don't respect this one. And how could God be any clearer? Yeah. Don't respect the Benjamite. There is another son for you. A different son for you. Yosha. Yeah, absolutely. This is the choice between Paul and Yosha. And Thomas Jefferson, pretty smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote that Paul was the first to corrupt the message of Yosha. He was the leader of the chorus, corrupting his message. Thomas Jefferson recognized it.
I've seen his Bible. He tore out most of Paul's writings.
He tore out everything except Yosha's. He tore out all of Paul's writings.
Right.
All of Paul's letters. He completely eliminated
Luke
them.
also.
Yeah. He only retained Yosha's words. That's, by the way, the only part of it that I care about. The only part of it that I'll read. The only part of it I consider. Only part of it I'll consider is Yosha's words. He did the same thing that I would do. So he is predicting not only the birth of Christianity, but the fact that while Christians believe that their religion is based on their Jesus, the fact is it isn't. Based on Paul. They ignore everything Yosha said, which is to be Torah observant, to never undermine, never neglect the Torah. Don't ever think that he came to annul the Torah. They completely ignore and disrespect the words of Yosha. They do not follow him in his observance of Pesach, Matzah, Bakorim, and Shavuot. They reject those things. They don't honor the Sabbath as he did. They instead respect Paul. And they believe what Paul said. But Christianity, at its heart, is a complete rejection of the son that matters, Yahowah, and a complete reverence for and respect for the Benjamite.
I don't believe most Christians can deal with that information. You're absolutely right. They can't process that.
They can't process it. But it is the simplest way for a rational person to get them to reject Christianity. Which is to say that
how do you ignore that?
Yeah, you cannot be a follower of Yahowah unless you are Torah observant. He was Torah observant. If you're going to follow him, you must be Torah observant. And if you are Torah observant, then you cannot be a Christian.
Well, isn't that the old saying? What would Yahowah do?
Yeah, he would follow the Torah, and he did. And
he did.
Right.
And then too.
Paul's famous way of saying things was to say, "But I, Paul, say."
Yes.
How many times did he say, "But Yahowah said"?
Never.
He attempted one time to quote him. In 13 letters, he attempted one quotation, and he did exactly the same thing with Yahowah's citation of the covenant that he did every time he attempted to quote Yahowah.
Now think about that.
First, he took him out of context, which is the only means to understanding.
Right.
Then he only quoted a small part of a sentence, and he eliminated the portions even of the phrase that he was conveying so that it could be interpreted to mean the opposite of what was actually being said. And that's the one quote that he has of Yahowah. Took it out of context, only quoted a small fraction of it, removed a bunch of words even in the clause that he was citing to draw things together that were actually separated. And he only did that one time. So think for a moment the stupidity of thinking that Paul was called by Yahowah to speak and write on his account, when he only quoted him once, and the one time he quoted him, he misquoted him. The one thing that he quotes correctly is the first time he claims that he sees Yahowah, he says, "It's difficult to kick against the goad." That's Dionysus's most famous line, accurately quoted from the Baccalaureate.
Right.
So he gets Dionysus quoted correctly.
How's that one?
But,
aren't you proud? Rachel would be so proud.
Oh, Rachel is saying, "I told you so."
I hate this guy.
I told you so. Wow. So when he became stubborn, unyielding, and confusing, confrontational, and an obstinate opposition, with distressing resistance and a superior attitude of arrogance, manifesting perplexing corruption, and being a tremendously painful burden during labor and childbirth, she said to the one helping her give birth, "You should choose never," this is al-Yare, never to respect, revere, or honor, choosing never to afford a high status or authority to this one, because indeed another son is for you. And it was with her soul coming out that indeed she was dying. What does Yahowah call Shaul? Called him out by name 666 years exactly before Paul would write his first letter, the one to the Galatians. What did he say? What did he say of Shaul? That he was the plague of what?
Plague of death.
Plague of death. So the Benjamin's mother is immediately killed.
Symbolically, yeah.
Yeah. She dies as a result of this boy who would later become Benjamin.
He's tainted with death.
He's tainted with death. He's literally born in death.
Out of death, yeah.
Yeah, born out of death. His birth caused his mother to die. His birth has caused billions upon billions to die. He is the plague of death. That as she was dying, she called out his name. Ben-Oni, my son of unrighteousness, my son of idolatry, my son of iniquity, my son who exerts himself in vain. From O-N, egotistical and failed, evil and wicked, unjust, false, arrogant, and troublesome. Is there a better descriptive phrase for Shaul, the self-appointed Apostle Paul, than Oni? Unrighteousness,
No, that's
idolatry, iniquity, wicked, unjust, false, arrogant, and troublesome, egotistical, failed, vain.
he mentions every one of those things in all his letters.
You betcha.
He confesses in all of his
Correct.
letters. I mean, his letters are confessions to anyone
Right.
paying attention.
Correct. Yeah, he says that he was uncontrollably vicious. He said he was a sexual pervert.
Mm-hmm.
He admits to being insane. He admits to being duplicitous, to pretending to be things he wasn't to gain control over people. He admits to being demon-possessed.
Now, who represents God throughout the Torah who says they're demon-possessed? I mean, what do you relate that to?
Why don't you tell me somebody who's speaking for God who is insane? Now, God chooses people who are flawed. Now, he does so for two reasons, really. I'm going to go three reasons.
Okay.
The first reason he chooses people that are flawed is because when it comes to his name, you know, there's this myth that his name is too righteous to mispronounce, and that we shouldn't pronounce it over respect for him, and that unless you're going to...
Rabbi's point of view.
Yeah, so from Yahowah's point of view, the person that he chose to introduce us to his name, to speak his name to the world, had a speech impediment, Moshe. So God is telling you right there, yeah, do your best with it. You're not going to impress me with your diction. Yeah, it's not going to do it. You're not going to offend me with your diction. If I'm not offended by a guy with a speech impediment saying my name, trust me, I'm not going to be offended if you mispronounce it.
Yeah.
And the person that he taught us, that really he chose to reveal the most important insights as to how to observe the Torah and how to be considered right with God, undermines the whole myth of Pauline Christianity, that if you break any of the Torah's laws, that you're guilty of all of them, and therefore you will be condemned. Didn't Dode break about all of them?
I'm just I think you got everyone.
So wasn't the flaws of Dode perfectly suited to convey the benefits of properly observing the Torah and being right with God?
Yes, there is a way. There is a way to walk to become the dead.
Right. So flaws, God communicating through imperfect people, he does this specifically for the purpose of sending a message. For example, I never realized why the issue was with Jeremiah was Jeremiah said, I'm way too young for this. Choose somebody. I'm way too young for this. Well, his story is the oldest story there is to tell. His story is the one that would not be manifest, would not play out before our eyes for another, well, it would be 6 centuries. The world would grow old before what Jeremiah was telling us about, because Jeremiah speaks about Christianity. His audience was the Gentiles, and he's exposing and condemning Christianity. And so he chose someone who was young to oppose the elders of the church. All the way through, God chooses that. So that's one reason. The second reason is obvious. If God didn't choose to work through flawed people, there'd be no...
Who's going to work through?
Yeah, who's going to work through? The next reason is that the people who are flawed and know they're flawed,
yes,
are easy for God to work through, because we admit we're flawed and we just get out of the way and say we're irrelevant. We've got nothing going for us that should be of any interest to you. Knowing who we are, where we came from, is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing our credentials is irrelevant. Our credentials are irrelevant. If you're flawed and you know it, then you not only get out of the way, but you get really excited when Yahowah is able, with a dull and dented implement, to reveal something worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I think the next reason is that in reality, and this is really akin to the last one, that when pearls of great insight are presented by someone who has nothing going for him that would impress anybody, then maybe there's a few people that might say, well, how did that come about if the inspiration didn't come from somebody who's really smart? Because this dude, he ain't.
Yeah, you kind of expect Einstein to come up with a good theory.
Yeah.
I expect a whole lot out of me.
That's correct. That's correct. There would be no reason for anyone to turn to us for insights into God, we don't have any credentials. But when we're providing more of them, more insightfully, more convincingly, more correctly than anyone else, that tells us that our source is extraordinary.
Yahowah.
Yeah, the source is extraordinary. Yeah. So this individual is the antithesis of that. Egotistical and vain. Failed, false, unjust. But then his father summoned him. The father doesn't give any reason. Father didn't listen to his dead wife's last confession.
No.
Just said, no, I'm going to summon him as Benjamin. But that's all right, because Benjamin adds something to it.
Mm-hmm.
The one going south.
Right.
Towards the Sea of Gentiles. It's just another layer of information. All pretty powerful stuff that we learn simply by taking the time. Now, let's just look at these names here. In order, we have Benjamin, son headed south to the Sea of Gentiles. Cush, the one who was crooked, luring others into a trap. Abiel, whose father was El, the Canaanite god. Tesur, who besieges and binds as an adversary by prescribing drugs. Bechorath, who was the first to cry and complain, lamenting the birthright. And Aphak, the one who breathes, whose breath breaks and ensnares inflaming souls.
Yeah, words.
Yeah. Isn't that powerful?
Well, that's amazing. Well, just the cursory look I did the first time around, I went, my gosh.
Yeah. So I don't know if any of this applied to King Saul.
Maybe a tiny little bit.
But you
are influenced by your relatives, especially your father, but not to the point. That wasn't written for him.
No, it all applies to the self-proclaimed Apostle Paul. Yep.
Yeah.
The author of half the Christian New Testament devoted himself to Gentiles, claiming exclusive authority over them. He was crooked by his own admission, pretending to be whatever gave him an advantage over those that he sought to entrap. His El, God, was the Lord, a nameless deity that was known by these two titles, God and Lord. But there was another title, Christ, based upon the Greek Chriso, which speaks of the application of drugs. Paul even admitted to being possessed by a representative of Satan, making him adversarial. Moreover, his twisted thesis required Yehudim forfeiting their birthright to the covenant, so that he could style a new one by breaking the old one.
That should make them running out of the aisles to hear that.
You'd think so. If you were a Christian, you should be.
I know.
Incredibly. Yep.
It's another wow.
Yeah. The next line may apply to both men, even to their fathers. He was an individual going south. Note that Shaul ventured out of Tarsus, which was due north of Israel, veering toward the Sea of the Gentiles, also true with Paul. Both came from wealth, but it was Paul who bragged about his physical ability to cause suffering and his religious and political prowess as a result of his rabbinic schooling. In fact, he bragged that he was second to none in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover, the disciple Shimon, Peter, specifically accused Paul of circular reasoning, saying that his letters caused the unwary to suffer. Twisting the Torah to suit his agenda was Paul's specialty. He was a master at it. which is why I suspect is the reason he has been able to bamboozle so many souls. He was good at twisting something that people don't know very well. In fact, that's the thing that as we turn to Proverbs 6, God's going to speak about why he thinks that Paul and Christianity are an abomination, why he hates Paul and Christianity. And after he finishes his list of things that he hates, he's going to say the antidote is the covenant, its terms and conditions, and the Torah, which presents it. If you know the Torah, you can't be fooled by the likes of Paul.
No, you're covered.
Yep.
You're protected.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine naming a son Shaul. Question him. Especially considering that Sheol is the realm of dead souls who are questioned and then eternally separated from God, a place of no return, of abandonment and punishment. Worse, after the failures of King Shaul, why would a father name their son after him? But there is the fascinating and unexpected part for all of this. I'd like to reemphasize it. That is that Shaul was good. And being good, obviously, gets a person nowhere with God. You know, how many people say, well, I think I'll be get into heaven because, you know, I was good.
Hey, look at all the good things I did.
Yeah, I had a good heart.
Mm-hmm.
I was a good person. Well, God's saying good doesn't mean crap. Doesn't mean anything. Being right is important. Being good's not. It's nothing wrong with being good. But if your claim to fame,
doesn't mean you grow up and become a murderer.
Yeah, if your claim is being
like a big sign says, "Look at me."
Right.
I mean, you've done nothing unless you've agreed with the covenant until you've done what he's asked you to do.
I would never once claim to be good.
No,
I'm not a bad person, but I would never say you should follow me because I'm setting a good example. Would never say that. I would never say that I'm good, but I will say that I'm right.
Yeah, well, you've never said follow me either.
Ever. No, being good doesn't get you anywhere with God. Being right does.
Yes.
But that makes sense because good is purely subjective. I mean, people think they do good all the time, but they're really not doing anything worthwhile or good.
Yeah, the people that go off on a Mormon mission would be consider themselves doing good works, serving others, being good.
Stealing children away from it.
People making a donation to the church think that that's good. No, not from God's point of view. Bad. It promulgates the lie.